Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today I'm going to be testing out Rick Martinez's recipe for BA's Best Snickerdoodles. I've never been a fan of Snickerdoodles. I haven't had a single one that I like. It could be that I've never had a good Snickerdoodle recipe, or it could be that I just don't like Snickerdoodle. I guess we're going to find that out today. If I don't like this recipe, I probably don't like them at all. Regardless of whether or not I like the recipe, I hope that this video is useful for those of you who are not chocolate dessert fans, because I know it can be challenging to find non-chocolate desserts. So I do these recipe tests every Wednesday. If you like this one, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Without any further ado, let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do is whisk together our dry ingredients. AP flour, cream of tartar, which is an acid that will react with the baking soda, and some kosher salt. So I'm going to whisk this together just until it's evenly combined. And now we're going to set this aside and move on to the wet ingredients. For the wet ingredients, I'm using my stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you could do this with an electric hand mixer as well. So here I've got 2 sticks of melted and slightly cooled unsalted butter. It's warm to the touch, but definitely not hot. So I'm going to pour this in. To that, I'm going to add granulated sugar and brown sugar. And now we're going to beat this until the sugar is evenly incorporated into the butter. This should only take about 30 seconds. So that sugar looks like it is incorporated into the butter. Now we can add in our vanilla extract, and we'll just beat that to get the vanilla incorporated. And now we can add in our 2 large room temperature eggs. And now we're going to beat this until this mixture turns a pale yellow color. It should start to thicken up a little bit and kind of form ribbons as it falls back into the bowl. So this should take about 3 minutes. So since I'm using my scraper beater, this actually took only about 1.5 minutes for me. But whenever you're baking, you want to use the visual cue, not the written recipe exactly. So this said we want it to be light, fluffy, and pale. We're light, fluffy, and pale. So I'm going to call this good here, and we're going to move on to the next step. All right, now with the mixer running on low speed, I'm going to gradually add in my dry ingredients. So you can see that this mixture is super runny. It's very loose. It looks nothing like cookie dough. However, we're going to let this sit at room temperature for 30 minutes. During that 30 minutes, the flour in here is going to hydrate, and this dough is going to stiffen up and look more like a normal cookie dough. All right, so our dough has been chilling for 30 minutes. It's definitely stiffened up significantly from where we were when we were first done mixing this. And now I've got here some granulated sugar and cinnamon. And we're just going to whisk this together with a tiny little whisk. The recipe wants us to use a 1-ounce ice cream scoop or a heaping tablespoon. I'm using my OXO medium cookie scoop. This is what I always use. It's a 1.5 tablespoons. So I'm just going to make sure that this is super flush, and I think that'll be like a heaping tablespoon approximately. So nice and level there. And then we need to roll this into a ball, and then we're going to roll it in the cinnamon and sugar mixture. For efficiency's sake, I'm going to go ahead and just scoop out a bunch of dough balls, and that way I can kind of make it more like an assembly line. And we're not smushing it. We're going to let it sit upright because it'll spread out during baking. And you do want to space these about 3 inches apart to allow for some spreading so they don't run into each other. So I'm going to pop this into my preheated 400-degree oven on the center rack. We're baking this for 8 to 10 minutes. The visual cue we're looking for is for these to be darkened around the edges and look puffy and soft in the center. So the cookies have been out of the oven cooling for about an hour, so they are down to room temperature, and this is the finished product. It's a nice round cookie. I like the presence of the cinnamon and sugar on the outside. It looks pretty uniform. The cookie's definitely spread out a bit, so this is not a thick cookie. It's like a normal, I'd say maybe like 1 centimeter tall. And overall, I really like the appearance. The smell while these was baking was absolutely incredible. It was just cinnamon everywhere, so I really like that. Let's go ahead and break into this and see the texture. So, not super crumbly, not really looking like it's going to be a chewy cookie, which is typical of what I remember Snickerdoodles being. It looks a little bit airy inside. It's almost like a really dense cake. So there is kind of like a puffy structure that's happening inside of here. Let's give it a taste. Okay. So it's really crispy on the outside. It's really pleasant. The texture of the cookie itself, it's not chewy like a chewy chocolate chip cookie. Almost spongy might be the right word for it. It's kind of interesting. I love the flavor. Perfectly sweet. It's very kind of mild and understated. You're definitely getting the cinnamon sugar, but the cookie itself, I'm not getting a ton of flavor, which is maybe a good thing. This is very like mild. It almost doesn't even feel like you're having like a cookie because it's so like appropriately sweetened. I think BA does generally, I guess, a really good job hitting the right sweetness level on their desserts to where they're not like over the top. So I do like what's going on there. For an afternoon snack, I feel like this is like a snack-worthy cookie. It's definitely better than Snickerdoodles I've had in the past. So in the past, they were always really puffy, really cake-like in a bad way. So the texture here is kind of similar to what I remember Snickerdoodles being, where it is aerated, it is light, it is kind of a little bit fluffy and has that kind of like cake-like crumb texture inside. However, this is much better. It's kind of a half step going toward like a normal chewy chocolate chip cookie or something like that, where it's still enjoyable for me to eat because I don't enjoy that cakey cookie. So I think that this is a really good compromise, actually. So this definitely has changed my mind about Snickerdoodles. I think I am a fan of Snickerdoodles. I just had always had really bad ones. So if you know someone who doesn't like chocolate desserts, or if you're just wanting to diversify your cookie portfolio, I think that this is definitely worth giving a try. So I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.